like this, man. It's like a butterfly flapping his wings deep down in the forest, man. It's gonna cause a tree fall like 5,000 miles away, man. There ain't nobody seeing nobody. Man. See, like, you don't even know, man. It's like you're born into this world, man. And you got like that, man. That's the point, man. Or like the dang old candle, man. It don't matter, man. These old things.
All right, Scott Horton.
What a
Welcome
great
to Jay
intro.
Burden Show.
Dude, you got the best goddamn old intro there I ever seen.
Yeah, I love that intro. It's I had an old one, and I used royalty-free music, which means it's royalty-free until we decide to sell it to someone, and now we own all your podcasts. So I had a buddy in mind, and I basically just said, make whatever you want. And when he sent me that, I was like, perfect. That is exact. I didn't even know what I was asking for, and that's what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, I have my bumper music is now a custom thing. And for a long time I played Beastie Boys, but it's now a custom thing that it's actually, the song is called Dang Old Bobby, and we're all big King of the Hill fans. And that's actually my theme song now. And then he's writing me a new one right now along the same lines, which is kind of not too poppy, but kind of upbeat punk rock, sort of intro for me and Daryl's new show. But yeah, because of that same problem, like I got to make sure I own these songs. That way it's not a problem later,
Yeah, no, definitely. And especially when you're kind of riding the line between being, an amateur and a professional, and a decision you made, 3 years ago when you're like, yeah, we'll see if this works out, all of a sudden is an actual business decision you have to stand by. But I'm glad you brought up your show with Daryl, because that's been dynamite. That's been great. And obviously that's not why we're here to talk about that, but it's been really good to see you guys.
You just reminded me I need to prepare for today's show. So thanks. I'll do that right after this.
This is the least professional thing possible, but tell Daryl to check his DMs.
Okay.
No, I'm mostly joking. The point is, I wanted to bring you on to discuss Russia-Gate, because I caught an episode with you, mutual friend of ours, Tommy. Great episode talking about Russia-Gate. And just for context, I was too young to vote for Trump the first time around. And so the whole Russia-Gate thing to me, I mean, I knew it was happening, but really at that time, no one under 30 cared about it. It was the CNN crowd. And so kind of missed it. But I did catch some of the documents and some of the allegations pushed out by Tulsi Gabbard, right? Director of National Intelligence. Right. And so that got me thinking about it. And then your remarks were quite interesting. And I have a feeling I am not the only person who has next to no knowledge of the Russia-Gate scandal past they said Donald Trump did something with the Russians. And so I realize that's a pretty vague question, but if you could you kind of vaguely just give a, thumbnail sketch of the scandal, quote unquote, and we can go from there?
Yeah. And what happened was the CIA, the FBI, and the Clinton campaign and their auxiliaries framed Trump for treason. They made it seem like Russia had hacked the DNC and that they had 1,000 points of contact between Russian intelligence services and Trump, including part of it was supposedly a 5-year plan and cooperation between Trump and the Russians to install him in power in order to, destroy the world order to Russia's benefit, as the Steele dossier claimed. So essentially, this is like, and I'm not making fun of people who are onto something good and important, you know what I mean? But there are like just total kooky conspiracy theories where basically people are grasping at straws, but then there's a lot of straws. So if you use your imagination real hard, it all really does add up, and you can kind of make yourself believe anything. And so in this case, it was a classical conspiracy theory, but it was manufactured by the government itself, by the intelligence services, to frame Trump. Essentially, they did to Trump the same thing that they did to Saddam Hussein in 2001 and 2 and 3 in the lead up to war there, which is just accuse him of 1,000 things. And so it sounds like, God, some of it must be true. The CIA is really sure. And then everybody just stands by that. And it's essentially the exact same thing. Like they did it to America's own president. And in fact, in the first place, they started it with a guy who was presumed to be, for anyone who could do the arithmetic, they could see he was going to be the nominee of a major party candidacy, right? We're not talking about framing the nice lady from the Green Party or somebody from the Libertarians. We're talking about framing the Republican Party candidate. And it was supposed to cripple him so that he couldn't win, so that she could win. But he ended up winning anyway. So then they ended up covering their asses basically by expanding the thing and pretending that, oh yeah, no, it really was true, into his new presidency. And then once he was sworn in, and after just a few weeks, I guess 6 weeks or so, he fired the head of the FBI. They used that as a pretext to pretend to now launch another new investigation of him directly in the name of him potentially being a foreign agent and firing his own FBI director, as though the president of the United States doesn't have the right to fire the director of the FBI. And that if he did that on orders from the Kremlin, they pretended to wonder, and ordered a special counsel investigation to investigate his entire campaign and their supposed ties to Russia, which they ran from the spring of 2017 through the spring of beginning of the summer of 2019. So the whole thing lasted 3 years plus. And it was all just complete crap. It was 1,000 lies. And at the core of it was that Putin had decided he was terrified of old Hillary and he needed his compliant, blackmailed, essentially slave, right? Like a compromised spy. They claim had been blackmailed, been videotaped, let's just say romping with women of the night for your audience here, to be very general about it. People can read into it. All of it was a complete hoax, man. And I mean, all of it was a complete hoax. And they go, well, but no parts of it are true. No, not parts of it are true. It was all a hoax, including that the Russians even had anything to do with hacking the DNC and delivering those emails to WikiLeaks or any of it. And that's the one that they still rely on. They'll whittle the whole thing down. They'll forget about 10,000 claims. And then they go, yeah, but still, everybody knows, though, that Russia hacked the DNC. Oh, yeah, how do you know that? Because the CIA says so. But the NSA won't vouch for it. The NSA shows up and they go, well, that's what they're saying. So what are you going to do? That's the NSA's position on it. We give it low to medium confidence. In other words, the one organization in the world that could guaranteed tell you who did it if it was done over the internet can't tell you who did it. In other words, so strongly indicating that it wasn't done over the internet, and it's not that the NSA had hacked into every surveillance camera in the world, so they don't know who went in there with a thumb drive, as William Binney and those guys surmised from the first place, which again is supposition, but still far more plausible than what we know was essentially, especially now that you're catching up at the end and you're getting the now declassified annex to the Durham report, and you're like, spoiler alert, dude, you're getting the ending here that like, yep, they knew they were lying all along. And the whole thing was that Hillary was in trouble because she had deleted 30,000 emails that were, of course, tied to her. It was the tie between the difference between her being the Secretary of State and the new president. There's all these foreign governments, especially pouring millions of dollars in industry and whoever else, pouring millions of dollars into her foundation. And this obvious corruption. And she completely deleted and erased 30,000 emails. And this was a huge scandal. And so what they had to do was cheat and say, you know what? You want to talk about emails? The Russians hacked these emails and put them on WikiLeaks. Totally different set of emails. And then in fact, like, this wasn't written in the script literally, but they got exactly the reaction that they wanted to do out of the mainstream media press. And if you were like to just Google it in quotes, you'll see it 10 million times. But her emails. Oh, but her emails. Meaning that all this Russia stuff is true about Trump. But you would have us cry and complain about her emails. You would report on Hillary Clinton and, first of all, her missing ones. And then second of all, the ones that were leaked and posted to WikiLeaks that were highly embarrassing and showed that they absolutely were cheating against Bernie Sanders, caused the resignation of the leaders of the Democratic Party, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Brazile, and was a huge scandal and really hurt Hillary, that leak, whoever was behind it did really hurt, but there's no reason to think it was the Russians at all. In fact, they lied about it so badly. Some people even surmise that it was Hillary herself, like did as a false flag against herself. I don't believe that, because I think it was just too bad of a self-inflicted wound. The damage in those emails was too great for her to bear, just to say that it was done for Trump. You know what I mean? I don't think that part adds up, but they were like, they already had the plan in effect to try to frame him. And then when those emails came out, they said that was all the Russians intervening on Trump's side. And they just essentially, retconned the whole story, tried to build the story around it. And so if you want to get into the details, we can get into the details. But that's the sum of it, essentially, was the CIA and the FBI and the Clinton campaign, all of them knowingly lying the whole time. The actual employees, the CIA officers and the FBI agents who are working the cases, who do a good job and say, come on, this isn't true. They're stifled, and whatever they debunk, that's ignored. And whatever they pretend to bunk, they go, okay, that gets passed up the chain, right? So, for example, the Steele dossier that had all of these claims, and it was the Clinton campaign hired a law firm that hired a firm that paid this British former spy to write all of these lies. And then they funneled that into the intelligence, and they tried to pretend to corroborate it with the same people who wrote it, doing the pretended corroboration and the rest. But the FBI agents, who were actually just doing their job like the regular Joe, whose job it is to sit there in an office and work through it, well, they just put up a spreadsheet. This is John Solomon's reporting, by the way. They just put up a spreadsheet that showed, okay, well, here's all the claims. Here is what would have been public information. And here is the controversial part. And they showed how everything in there that was true was public information. Like, this guy got on a plane and went somewhere. That was in the Wall Street Journal, right? But then what happened while he was there, that supposedly scandalous, can never be corroborated, ever. None of it. So the FBI just essentially, guys who do this for a living, they just took one look at it and they're like, this is nonsense. CIA said the same thing. This is nonsense. But then the bosses pretended to not know that. They buried all that. They had all of these witnesses to interview. They refused to allow the agents to interview the witnesses because the witnesses obviously would have explained themselves. This is all a bunch of crap, let me tell you. So they wouldn't even let the agents talk to them. It was just COINTELPRO, man. It's what they did to the Black Panthers. That's what they did to Donald Trump. Get it? It was a frame up, 100%. And they were framing him for treason. They were saying that he was working with the Kremlin. Right? Like in the old days of the communists, this was the movie, The Manchurian Candidate. They did a remake with Denzel Washington that wasn't that great, but the story being that that the commies would somehow do a coup and overthrow our government, destroy our way of life forever, enslave us under totalitarian communism in service of the evil one world commie conspiracy. Well, now communism is over, but the Kremlin's still the Kremlin. And so they are doing this sort of half-assed red baiting of Donald Trump, even though, how much sense does that make? Because, okay, you're too young.
It's like John Birch in a pantsuit, right? It's ridiculous.
Well, let me say one more thing about it. Here's how ridiculous it is, okay? I was born in 1976. I was first exposed to Donald Trump, I'm guessing in 1983, right? The same year Return of the Jedi came out. And I was a little kid, and he was on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And he was the poster boy for Reaganite era bubble economy, yuppie excess, right? This is the guy with the fake tits girlfriend and the nice Ferrari, whatever it is. And who is, right? He's like a swashbuckling, braggadocious, whatever. He's the same guy he is now, only younger then. But that character, right? And he was just larger than life. He is quite literally a brand in the way that McDonald's and Madonna and Michael Jackson and for me, Hawk versus Hosoi during that time. This is the 1980s, man. Eddie Van Halen. Donald Trump is Eddie Van Halen. Donald Trump is a can of Coca-Cola Classic, right? He's Ronald Reagan. He is you only have these few, huge, these mega sort of personalities that define that era. He is one of them. He is inescapable in that sense. So now you're telling me the Golden Arches is a commie plot? Like, it's just so stupid, dude. The guy's the most famous real estate tycoon in the world. How could he be a sellout to the Russians of all people? The whole thing was crazy. But then here's the thing about it, right? Is if you don't believe it, then what you're saying is that you think that the CIA and the FBI and the Democrats and the media would all work together to push 1,000 different lies saying that it's all true. Now that's crazy. You're the conspiracy theorist. And they just turn it around. But what are they? Literally, who are they? They are the middle-aged female audience of National Public Radio and MSNBC. Do they know anything about Russia? Do they know anything about espionage? No, dude. This is a soap opera for them, dude. And they believed it so hard, dude. Just as you have, and I don't want to pick on any particular conspiracy theory that people love or whatever, but I'm just saying, like, very generally speaking, on the far left and the far right, you have much alternative health advice and understanding and practice, some of which may not really be reliable. Okay, let me just say that. But you have people, when you go that far, like to the populist left and the right, and I don't mean like fascists and communists, I just mean leftists and right-wingers out in the world. When you're that committed and you don't believe anything they say, that of course goes for big medicine. And then that means a lot of people are half right and half wrong about maybe how corrupt the current system is, but maybe also how certain they are about the alternatives too, right? Where like people can make themselves believe things. People can convince themselves. There's a movement now that says there's no such thing as nuclear weapons. All that footage is fake. All that testimony is fake. There's no reason to believe that you could split an atom or fuse two together. That's just crazy. And it's all a hoax to make you afraid, because no one would be that crazy. And just people can find a way to build that story and leave out all the evidence that says, no, come on. Right. But make that seem true. I'm sorry for picking on one conspiracy theory, but it's the kind of thing where like you could see it all the time. You could see it, say, with religious beliefs that you don't agree with. You can see how well they convince themselves that, but that's not true. You know what I mean? Like, whatever.
100%.
These things happen, and that's what happened.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, my primary memory of this is like the almost religious fervor, and it's honestly sort of we sort of saw a mirror image in 2020 of the whole Stop the Steal thing of like, well, we didn't lose. We're going to find a way so that we don't lose anymore. It was like this great cope, and the repeated refrain all through, the Russia-Gate scandal was the walls are closing in, right? It's this idea that, we're eventually going to squish Trump like he's in a trash compactor and get him out. And then we can go back to, the eternal kind of like halcyon days of, Obama too, right? In Hillary Clinton. And I remember I still have this photo on my phone. I don't have a way to show it conveniently, but it was right after the Mueller report fizzled. And I was walking through a relatively progressive area and I saw a little votive candle of, I guess it would have been Comey, I think, but it was literally smashed on its side. Like someone in a rage had like thrown it out, but it was just like this perfect example, right? Of like the almost religious nature that it took on, because it wasn't really about, you know what I mean? It wasn't really about Russian interference. It was what explains why we don't have Hillary Clinton as president. And so to your point,
I'll tell you, I'll just add real quick. Sorry to interrupt, but just to add to what you're saying there's a buildup that there was this famous left-wing journalist named Eoin Higgins. I'm pretty sure, I don't know how to say it right. EOIN, something like that. And I looked for this tweet and it was gone. I guess it was deleted. But I remember there was a debunking of the P-tape of supposedly Trump and the professional night ladies there in Moscow. And he said, counterpoint, don't take this from me. That was his argument, man. That was his tweet. And it was like, you can see what's going on there, this need to believe, to use this at least.
Yeah. And I think that growing up in the Bush era, right, like very much in Red America, I remember just the absolute rage directed towards leakers, what happened in, Abu Ghraib, any one of these things where it was like, those people are traitors to America for showing us what we're doing. And you fast forward not even 8 years. And many of those same committed anti-war people who hated the evil racist George Bush, and I'm standing here not at all a fan of George Bush. Don't take this as a defense of the man. Like a switch flipped, excuse me. We're basically saying we need to take these leakers and, run them up a tree. And I had a very interesting conversation, and Scott, as I'm sure you're familiar, if you have very non-standard opinions, you get good at diplomatically answering questions, right? If someone asks you, you're maybe not for you, you're a prominent public figure, but ask you your opinion on something political, you can not lie, but say things in a diplomatic way so that you can sort of avoid, making Thanksgiving unpleasant for everyone. And I was talking to this 18, right? Just graduated high school, not a particularly serious thinker, as really no one is when they're 18. And we had a conversation about WikiLeaks. She brought it up. All right, fair enough. Let's go there. And reading the exact line as if it were 2017 all over again, right? The Russians got it to WikiLeaks in an attempt to overthrow our democracy. And very simple question. I just asked, well, did you wish you didn't know? Right? Would you rather those things still be hidden? Right? Would you rather us not know? And of course, it's a teenager, right? She was completely stumped, but okay, it's not like some grand moral victory, but it was just kind of an interesting example of like, for that group of people who are still bought in, there's a huge amount of cognitive dissonance in it at the root, right? Simultaneously, the Russians are, trying to overthrow our democracy, and Hillary Clinton is the best person ever, but I don't want anyone to know what she was actually doing, right? Which is sort of an uncomfortable position. So bringing this more into sort of current events, one of the things that I've noticed coming from the Trump regime is this idea that it was the Clintons and Obama behind this. They were knowingly pushing this. So for instance, there's actually a lawsuit, and I don't remember the name of the guy who's filed it. He was a government intelligence analyst, and he says that he was coerced and threatened with being fired by an associate of Brennan, I believe, for refusing to sign off on the Steele dossier. Basically, he wouldn't say this has been verified because it had not been verified. And so there seems as if there's a desire for the Trump admin to sort of go back through and sort of take scalps for this. So one, do you think there's any connection to Obama here? And two, how likely do you think that they're actually going to be able to, quote unquote, get these people?
Oh, man. Well, yes, Obama's guilty, but doesn't start with him, or I can't prove that starts with him or anything. There's part of it where I know he's responsible. Do I really think that Comey or Brennan, or definitely Obama, could be held accountable and actually prosecuted? It's doubtful. But then again, they went after Trump hardcore, and he's the king now, man. And that's what they say about it. You better not swing at the king and miss. Or if you do swing at him, you better make sure it works. And in this case,
interjection,
Trump could persecute John Brennan and lock him down, man. I'd love to see it. He deserves it so bad for so many different crimes. And he's guilty of this one. At this point, I don't even care if Trump just frames him for his own treason. I don't even care what he does with him.
Yeah.
Just drop him.
He's guilty of enough that whatever he gets charged with, it's certainly a life sentence.
I was about Bill Clinton's impeachment too. But just get rid of this guy, man. I don't care. But so it doesn't matter. Like, he's absolutely guilty as hell here anyway. So we don't have to bend the law. Like, he absolutely is. So look, Obama really, the part that we know Obama plays in this is we know for a fact that he knew by the summer of 2016 that Hillary is doing this. Now, then we know in December of 2016, in the lame duck period, that he orders, this is what's coming out now, that he personally ordered them to show what Russia did, not find out if they did or not, but show how they intervened for Trump, which is, get it? Like W. Bush would say, this is an outcome-based investigation, right? We know what you're supposed to conclude at the end. And that's where they went and just twisted all this data again, suppressed everything contrary, and put out this ridiculous ICA, they called it, Intelligence Community Assessment, of January of 2017. That was just nothing but a bunch of crap. And we laughed it off the scene at the time. I didn't know anyone took it seriously, but maybe everybody doesn't listen to anti-war radio, but I mean, the thing was absolutely a hoax. And Obama, we know for a fact that he knew 6 months before that Hillary is doing this. The irony there is that I believe that there's strong reason to believe. I don't think, well, look, no, it is proven, I think, isn't it? At least John Brennan says himself in his Frontline interview, I remember it right, I'm pretty sure that I do, that he says this started in 2015, at the end of 15. And then Matt Taibbi has a source, and I'm going to interview him again tomorrow. And I'm going to cram, by the way, I've been putting it off. I'm going to cram and study up on all the new stuff that has come out, which I have a pretty good handle on it. But by the way, I didn't mention, I do have 75 pages on this in Provoked, where I take all the different lies. I didn't know what to leave out. So I took every different lie that they told during that, and I debunk them all. I show exactly how they lied about essentially everything. So I was afraid someone would say, oh yeah, well, what about this thing? That's in there too, dude. None of that was true. So I got about 75 pages of it. It's the longest section of the new book, actually, is debunking this. And then I'm going to study very hard on all the new, especially the newly declassified annex to the Durham Report, which I urge everyone to read, not only my book Provoked, but read the Durham Report, and you will just be beside yourself. It isn't, and it was such a limited investigation. He was never allowed to interrogate Comey or anything important, dude. He was only able to get some low-hanging stuff. But if you just read the Durham Report, read it out loud to your friend, you'll be like, what in the world is this? You will not believe it. I mean, you will believe it, but it's unbelievable. That's the thing, is what I mean. It is just out of this world that they would dare to do this. Anyway, my point being, I think it's very likely, all indications are to me, that John Brennan made this up and began the frame-up job in the end of 2015 in cooperation with all who I don't know, but apparently I believe what Taibbi was told, and I forget if he has documentation of this particular part. I don't remember specifically him having documentation of this particular part. I believe he was told this, that at the end of 2015, Brennan had contacted the Five Eyes, that is the Anglophone countries, and told them, we want you to have your guys bump, quote unquote, bump into Trump campaign people wherever you can and see if you can come up with something. Now, this is my just speculation. I'm not saying I can prove this, unlike these people who would just, say anything. It looks to me like this is the probable origin of the original framing up of Papadopoulos, which didn't go very far, quite frankly, but it seems like it was an attempt to tell him something and then get him to repeat it to somebody else in a way that would implicate him somehow in getting this information from the Russians. Although Aaron Matei points out that the way that they came up with this story later, it seemed like, I'm not exactly sure. I wouldn't want to speak for him. I'm not exactly sure how to phrase his point. He just seems very skeptical about the whole thing. Let me just leave it at that. About the whole thing. It looks to me like this did happen, that this Maltese professor seems to have been sent to meet with this guy Papadopoulos and say something to him for someone else to try to get out of him later, or at least that was how it played out. Was he supposedly he did meet with this Australian diplomat, a guy named Downer. And after the WikiLeaks stuff came out a couple of months later, Downer supposedly went to the FBI and said that, this guy told me that the Russians told him that they have all these dirt emails on Hillary Clinton. Except the thing is, the original Maltese guy that supposedly leaked this information to Papadopoulos, he had no connection to Russia at all. So he knows some guy from a think tank there, but there's nothing there, dude. He's, if anything, and I show in the book at length, a lot of other journalists before me that I'm citing, they show this guy was MI6 or, an asset, not necessarily an officer, but like clearly was working for them and pals around with them and their guys all the time. Here's pictures of them with the Prime Minister and the Secretary of Defense and all these military officials and all these people. And so there's no tie to Russia there. And then at the end, when the FBI followed up the or when Durham followed up, at least, maybe in the first place, the Australian diplomat said he never said anything to me about the Russians or about emails. He just said that he heard that there was dirt on Hillary or something like that. So it was like how this was supposed to really amount to anything, I'm not sure, but it seemed like it was deliberate. Like they were targeting this kid who was, I shouldn't say kid, but he was a young man who was, the lowest ranking sort of foreign policy guy, very eager and ambitious. His job was arranging, he did succeed in arranging meetings between, say, for example, Trump and Fattah al-Sisi, the El Presidente of Egypt, and things like that. So that was his job, was to try to facilitate meetings and this kind of thing, and to be social and try to arrange, in fact, well, whatever. Anyway, it's one small part of it. But that's, to me, another indication, a potential indication, I should say, that this thing started before Hillary started her business with it all, which was fittingly on April the 1st of 2016, when they went and hired this law firm, which is called Perkins Coie. It's spelled like Coie, I guess, C-O-I-E. And this was the law firm that then hired the company that did the Steele dossier. And they also hired the Georgia Tech team that came up with a lot of the fake attribution about the hack and leak, and also about the so-called Alpha Bank, which is a Russian bank that they said was secretly communicating with a Trump server. And it was just spam for a Trump hotel. It had nothing to do with anything. They're like, oh, look, see the secret server where Donald Trump is secretly communicating with the KGB through this bank and all this stuff. You see how, like, this is really exciting if you're one of the ladies that believes in it. Like, oh, no, all the, like the people on The View on daytime TV or whatever, like, oh my God, the Alpha Bank. Like, it's so exciting. It's like something in a Bourne movie or whatever kind of thing that they can all like imagine well. And so it played well.
Two things. One, this is unrelated, but is very much a tinfoil hat Obama connection. Are you aware of who the Obamas just sold their Martha's Vineyard estate to?
No.
One Les Wexner, who you may...
Are you kidding? Jesus
I know.
Christ. Like, these people have no sense of public relations whatsoever. That is amazing. Is that really true?
Yeah, that happened. I can find the date on it. In July of this year they did. I just saw it come by. Literally, when I was looking for something else about Obama that you were mentioning, and that popped up, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Come on. Like, this is so...
That's so funny, man. I had not heard that. That's amazing. Jesus.
Yeah. Again, it was just funny. Just
find someone else, or like that he could just come up with a couple of shell companies to own each other to buy
exactly
or something, right? Like, why does it have to be that?
Yeah, it's a little bit on the nose, right? Especially in the midst of that scandal. He's going to
put Ghislaine Maxwell in there after Trump pardons her.
Yeah, exactly. But the actual point that I wanted to bring up.
Don't tell me climate change. They're afraid that the ocean is going to wash their mansion away, and that's why they fled, right? No.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And Les Wexner, I guess his people control the weather. I think that's the conspiracy
he's
I've
not
heard.
Worried about it. Not like they are.
Black people exempted from
conspiracy theories, they get afraid, but he knows better.
But point is, going back to, really just like the totally unbelievable, and let's be honest, very motivated leaps in logic, right? To me, at its base, even the assumption that for whatever reason, the Kremlin would prefer Donald Trump is sort of a buried premise. It's sort of just assumed knowledge that of course they would. And, much has been made of, the connection between, Donald Trump and the Russians. Even this was sort of this like incredibly embarrassing piece of protest art from the era, but it's sort of that, that famous image of the Soviet kiss, right? And some aspiring young street artist like, oh, I know, I'll paint it so it's Donald Trump kissing Putin. That'll show them, right? Which is a stupid example, but nonetheless kind of emblematic. But really, do we have any indication that Putin had a preference one way or another in the election?
Yes, and this is the new information that just came out. was that the CIA analysts who were the actual experts on this thought that they would have preferred Hillary. And they had at least one source who said that because, well, first of all, they said that Putin didn't really care either way because he thought the permanent establishment is going to have the same policy no matter what. But that he thought overall, and that I guess the national security state in Russia had assessed that, and I'm sure Putin agreed with this, that good old Hillary Clinton is essentially a clone standby for the permanent state, herself, right? And in other words, no surprises there. They know exactly what to expect from her and from her people for the next 4 or 8 years, and they think they can handle it. Whereas Trump is a bit nutty. And no, they don't have a 5-year relationship going back with him at all. He actually is a can of Coca-Cola, maybe one that's been shaken up. And they don't know exactly what he's going to do or how easy he'll be. Even if they thought, and they said in here that that Putin thought that he could manage either way, but that Trump would be whatever, X%, more unstable, and therefore a riskier bet, that they would have preferred to have her. And they probably, like most of the establishments around the world, and certainly in this country, assumed that she would win, which was a big false assumption on a lot of their parts. But, that was, I think, a big part of the assumption from the CIA and the FBI too, that, hey, this is what Dragon Lady wants, and she's going to be in charge in a minute here, so we better do what she says and go ahead and pretend to investigate all this crap and leak it to the media that we're investigating it because of how investigative it is and all of this, and try to make it seem like where there's smoke, there's fire, because they're trying to please her. And Comey himself later said, well, listen, we were operating in an environment in which we thought that she was going to be elected president next. He said that himself. So that was kind of the way they did it.
Yeah, and that's sort of an interesting thing, right? Is in a sort of broader context, right? The damage, at least on like a mass level, done to the reputation of our intelligence agencies, right? Who admittedly people like you and I have been, shall we say, not a big fan of for quite some time. But we sort of had this back and forth whiplash where on one hand, right, you have the whole MAGA movement political right saying, oh, the FBI is full of crooks. And then the kind of second blow, right? The left hand after the right of the whole bungled Epstein situation, right? It's sort of interesting to see that the damage done to our intelligence agencies is quite severe and on both sides of the political spectrum. Whereas at least for a while it was, well, we don't like Democrats' FBI, but we like it when it's our FBI. Yeah. And that was really one of the things I was the most worried about with Trump 2.0, is that effectively they would be able to pull kind of a Reagan maneuver and say, oh, you don't hate the government, you hate Democrats. And we're back in, we're fixing the FBI, we did it. Yep. And that seemed to work at least for a little bit, right? Until this Epstein scandal has completely ruined that plan entirely. And obviously that's not the point of why we're here today, although, you and Daryl have done some very good coverage. If you're interested, viewer, I recommend checking that out. But I think that when people talk about the politicization of the FBI, it's sort of a misnomer, right? Because it's like, okay, it's always been political, right? You mentioned, the Black Panthers and others. It's been the president's goon squad for as long as it's existed. But the degree to which it became involved in the 24-hour news cycle, right? Every day we're waiting for this big story, I think is sort of unique. So what do you think about the politicization of the intelligence agencies in that way, where they're no longer able to sort of hide behind like a veil of anonymity, right? Oh, the CIA, that's what the guy on 24, he's with them. That's cool. Instead of their dirty laundry basically being drugged through the media every day, every week.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, the crisis of confidence in their legitimacy is the best part of this, right? That's the silver lining on all this is, they're locking up some poor schmuck over nothing right now. Some mail fraud charge or something. Some guy's trying to run a business and they're railroading his ass and you'll never know his name. You know what I mean? They do it to Donald Trump, and you're like, my God, they can raid Mar-a-Lago like this. They can pretend to investigate his wife's dresser and all of these things. They could do that to him. And Donald Trump said, wow, they can do that to me. Wow, I bet they must do this to people all the time, huh? And it's like, yeah, see, like, this is the thing, is the FBI are the same people that burned all the Branch Davidians' little babies to death and called it a suicide back in 1993. And they're the same guys this whole time, dude. They're monsters. They hate the law. Like, yeah, they do go after bad guys sometimes, but probably only just
incidentally,
public relations.
right?
It's not their job. Job one, just the same as any bureaucracy, is protecting themselves. You say they're the president's private goons? I think that's the CIA. The FBI is the FBI deputy director's private goons, whoever that is. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I look at that, dude. They are their own agency. Their director may or may not be in charge at any given time, but they are going to do exactly whatever the hell they want, including murder people and extort people and commit any crime, dude. They're the worst. And so, yeah, that's your security force. They're absolutely as bad as the criminals they're supposedly protecting you from. And it is not supposed to be that way, but it absolutely is. And what you talked about, that Reagan effect, it's the same thing that happened under W. Bush. We spent the 1990s being anti-government. And then by 98, and thanks a lot, Bill, for this, by 98, it was, he cheated on his wife. Now it's Bill Clinton is a scumbag. Not, this scumbag has been in power doing horrible things every day for 8 years with a government that is far too big and far too powerful to let it fall in the hands of a scumbag like him. That was supposed to be the lesson, and, by the way, Ruby Ridge was under H.W. Bush, and Waco was under, planned before Clinton ever got there. And the FBI, they wanted to do what they wanted to do, but it was Clinton that gave them the final go-ahead and told them they could when it was his job to stop them. So, you know what I mean? Like, I admit that it was the guys on the scene that really wanted to finish the job. Jeff Jamar is the chief mass murderer there, dude, for sure. But him and his guys were doing everything they could to get the attorney general and ultimately the president to let them do it. Because that's what they like doing, murdering people, dude, and framing them and murdering them. Although in this case, it was the FBI really that framed them. And then the FBI that came and finished the job. And yeah, man, they're monsters, dude. So people absolutely should despise them and distrust them and disbelieve everything that they say. And as far as the liberals and their turn toward the war party, it's such an important point. People, it's the 20th anniversary right now of Camp Casey. I need to get Cindy Sheehan on the show. Maybe I can get her on by tomorrow. I keep forgetting that, but she still is fighting the good fight, dude. Every day. She was great on COVID and all that thing too, man. You think that all leftists were bad on it. Not her. She's badass as anybody on that stuff, man. And her son had died in Iraq War II, and she went and had a protest outside of Bush's camp in 2005. He said, your son died for a noble cause. And she regretted that she didn't get to ask the follow-up question. Well, what noble cause is that exactly? Could you please articulate it for me? And rather than having her to dinner and saying how sincerely sorry he was and trying to explain, he decided to give her the stiff arm. And so she held a protest camp outside of his so-called ranch, whatever his movie set that he bought when he started running for governor in 1999 to pretend like he's from the sticks or whatever.
Because the Bush family's in New York, they're New York's blue bloods, right? Yeah. Okay, exactly. Big difference.
It's later the Queen of England.
I try to avoid New England if I can.
No, they're good folks up there, and it's pretty country. But anyways,
you're more charitable than I am. But
okay, fair
actually,
enough. I'm a Texan. But anyway, the thing is here that what was I saying? So Cindy Sheehan. And so all the anti-war protesters at that time, yes, there's a lot of partisanship behind it. You could find a bunch of Hollywood kooks, complaining and whatever. But the thing is, they were right. Anybody could be the Iraq War and be against the Iraq War and be right that we shouldn't be doing this stuff. And the people who supported it were wrong. Sorry, simple as that. And if it's too bad because the liberals don't like it and the conservatives do this time, well, tough. But everyone should know better than to believe in these people and what they claim, especially when all of it is so easy to check and all of it's such nonsense where anybody who knew anything about the Middle East could tell you. The guy with the mustache and the beret and the guy with the beard and the Obi-Wan Kenobi robe are different dudes and have different agendas, entirely different ones. And this guy's not using that guy to kill us with because he knows better. It's as simple as that. Give me a break, dude. It was such a hoax that we had to go defend ourselves from Iraq, for God's sake, in a preemptive attack before they could get us. Oh, man, come on. And they got away with that because of this idiot partisanship. And so, but anyone who leaned left at all, and I'm a libertarian, don't lump me in, but anyone who leaned left at all could just see right through it because it was such a blatant falsehood. So, of course, they had a bias, they had a reason to see right through it, but they did. And unfortunately, a lot of them thought, oh, the whole war was for oil, and really it was for Israel. But anyway, it was for oil for Israel, if you want to put it that way. But the thing is, they were sincere and they were good on it. But then even before Obama came to town, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats climbed on Cindy Sheehan and the anti-war movement's back to take back the Congress, House and Senate in 2006, sworn in 2007. The first thing they did was bow down to Bush and give him all the money to escalate the Iraq war instead of end it. And by then, the Democratic Party, like everybody from like 2/3 to the left to center and the whole everywhere from there to the center, like that entire part of the, in other words, Democratic voters, anyone who's not so left wing that they wouldn't vote Democrat, you know what I mean? They all just said, well, whatever, and just made their peace with the war, essentially. They could still use it politically against Bush, but they weren't going to go that hard against it because now it was their Congress's responsibility. And in fact, and they could said this at the time from time to time that like, we still want to be able to use this against the Republicans in 2008. And so the Democratic Party bulk were willing to sacrifice the anti-war movement for partisanship. Then Obama comes to town and he's tall, dark, and handsome and all this stuff. And he portrays himself as one hair to the left of Hillary Clinton, which means one hair more authentic than her, right? And so, and of course, she's just a beast. And so everyone absolutely despises her. And so he's then the next, choice of the establishment after her. And now he's the one doing the killing. He promises to get out of Iraq, but he triples the war in Afghanistan. They say it was 30. It was 70,000 extra troops that he sent to triple that war for 3 years for no reason, killing hundreds of thousands of people, expanding the thing into Pakistan, absolute disaster. And of course went to, expanded in Somalia, expanded especially in Yemen and then Libya and Syria. I mean, just went nuts. But if someone was a liberal Democrat during that time, it's their guy doing it. And it's not as bad as like Lyndon Johnson in Vietnam, where you got like thousands of body bags coming home constantly here, right? It's mostly all over there. And like, hey, it's drone robots flying around killing the Yemenis. So even if one of them falls out of the sky, it just costs some money. And so people are willing to the liberal Democrats of America are willing to look the other way as long as it's Obama's national security state. And it was really bad for them, like, and who they are as people. And they got to live with that. I mean, we're talking about millions of Americans. Code Pink, by the way, they stayed hardcore. Medea Benjamin and all of them, they're absolutely committed, but their rank and file just floated away. All of these people who had supported them just went away. Not that the Code Pink people ever did. But then Donald Trump comes, and it's the CIA and the FBI who are framing him, and they're the ones going after him. So what does that mean to a liberal Democrat? Put yourself in the mind of a liberal Democrat who listens to National Public Radio and everything. Now Donald Trump is the virus, and the FBI and the CIA, they are rallying to protect the republic and the democracy from this aberrant change of power here, where with Russia's help, this criminal has usurped Duchess Hillary's rightful throne and is taking her place. And if it wasn't for the FBI and the CIA, he would be given the keys to the Kremlin. He'd probably turn over all our nuclear weapons to him and enslave us all under their tyranny forever and all of these things. So now the FBI and the CIA aren't just like their activity tolerable because we like their leader. Now it's, our heroes coming to save us. Right? They're the inoculation that we all need to protect us from this infection of Trump and his foreign sponsored coup d'etat that installed him in power. So at that time, you have their absolute selling of the last of their soul to Satan. Right now, they are just any part of the new left of the 60s who were the hippies, who were against Vietnam, who were against the CIA, who like wrote and read and watched Firestarter about the evil government CIA that like gives the poor child magic powers to start fires and with their horrible MK Ultra experiments. Like anybody who grew up watching Hamburger Hill or the Platoon or any of the anti-Vietnam War movies of the 80s and that whole spirit of anti-government populism on the left, that was just crushed finally for all time by Russia-Gate. And then it's only comes back now in the most just perverted forms. Like I give them respect for being good on Palestine, but like on every other thing, all their protests, and even on Palestine, it's true too, dude. It ain't fair, but it is just true that their protests just ring so hollow. I mean, the college kids, they're young. It's not their responsibility. But like overall, how credible is the anti-war left? And how seriously do the liberals need to take them when they just melt away when push comes to shove instead of standing their ground? And so it really is tragic. And you see how it's all just tied up in partisanship. The same way Donald Trump goes, first we take the guns, then we worry about the due process later. And conservatives somehow reconcile themselves to that. Like this guy's going to start banning our guns by executive order in a way that the Democrats wouldn't dare, but we'll just have, and not that went too far, but just think about the absolute riot that should have caused that he would dare to even utter those syllables. You know what I mean? But people find a way to make do. And that's just one example of many things that Trump has done terribly wrong.
Well, and you described the evolution, or really the kind of like cynical capture of the left-wing anti-war movement. But let's be honest, you saw a very similar thing happen on the right, where, and it's not a particularly clean lineage, right? But you look at the good faith paleoconservatives who said, look, we're done with the Cold War. We can be a normal country again. Like, let's stop being the world's policeman. And okay, they get their followers. They're sort of pushed out. And many of those people, many others, form the Tea Party, which certainly was, largely concerned with budgetary issues, but also had a strong strain of anti-foreign intervention in it. And that movement, not in its entirely, but gets folded into MAGA, right? Which is anti-war to a greater or lesser degree. But then what happens, right? They get folded in, and you've got, not everyone, I think less people than Donald Trump would have imagined, right? Cheering for Operation Midnight Hammer, right? Let's go fight the Iranians. Let's go do it all over again. And so to me, I'm always worried about that because I've lived through a couple of these cycles, that sort of containment, right? Where it's, you're making a deal with the devil of, well, you can get one or two things you want, but you can't touch foreign policy. It's like, that's the thing they can't ever let you have. And it is easy to get cynical on it when you've seen that loop back in, right? You see that dissident energy turned right back into the system. And all of a sudden, yesterday's dissidents are, basically losing their minds over, the same 3-letter agencies they were convinced were the devil incarnate 2 years ago, right?
Yep. I got to give credit to the right for having a bit more of a rebellious spirit than the left in this case, where they're just so willing to settle for Hillary Clinton, and where the Republicans are like, no, we refuse to accept George Bush or Jeb Bush, George Bush's son and brother. We refuse to have anything to do with that, man. We want this guy instead. We insist on it. There's at least a spirit of resistance there, like you're saying with the Tea Party. And it's there on the left too. I don't want to sell people short, especially there are a lot of great, people in left-wing media and great journalists who've done really great work that I've been very reliant on all these years. So I don't mean to sell them out. When I'm complaining about that, I'm really talking about, well, all the ones that went away, right? And especially the mass of the movement out there. Like, what's your priority? Ending war is 11th on your list of things we got to do. Abolishing the world empire, that's not a priority. How are we supposed to ever take care of anything else if we got a world empire? You know what I mean? As regardless of where you are on this spectrum, it just doesn't make sense to think that the middle part of North America can dominate Eurasia forever. We cannot either, man. We got to figure out something else, a better way to proceed.
Well, and this is not a moral argument. It's just a very Well, what I'm about to say is,
I'm
we
sorry.
could almost understand it more if we ran the American Empire like the Roman Empire, right? Understand it as in this is something humans do, right? If we had, again, I don't want that to be the case, but if we had, 300,000 Afghan slaves building a new Colosseum, right? It would at least be, this is something human empires have done before. But to be honest, normal Americans stand nothing to benefit from this empire. We are getting screwed. It's beneficial to certain zip codes in Northern Virginia, right? It's beneficial to a, shall we say, overly prominent Mediterranean democracy, quote unquote, right? They benefit. But it is one of the things where I get incredibly frustrated, especially with, kind of like good-hearted normal Americans who get so swept up with this kind of war fury that they will see no benefit from. It's infuriating.
Yeah. Well, look, a big part of it is just that presumption of legitimacy that, again, with Russiagate is a good example of this, right? Where if you don't believe in it, you're the kook, because that would imply that they would lie to us that badly. And it just can't be, dude. You tell me the FBI and the CIA teamed up with the Democrats to just frame this guy, and the whole media just completely went along with this, including not just the Post and the Times, but the Journal too, and all of this stuff. And we all had to just wait in bated breath, as you said, for the next FBI leak to come out and to implicate this and go through this for years. It seems crazy. But then, yep, that's exactly what happened, all right. They were lying the whole time, and they knew it, dude. It was a giant frame-up job. It was a giant conspiracy to pretend there was a conspiracy. That's what it was. And it was heavy, man. That's a lot. I mean, you could compare it to almost an assassination. That's going so far. It's just nuts. And it's the same thing with when they lie us in a war. I have quoted this guy a million times now. I hope he is out there somewhere and is not too mad at me. But I had this guy in my cab in 2003, right before the war. And he was like a rich guy who was in real estate, and he stayed in the, rich guy bachelor pad apartments in South Austin. And was like, you could tell he's a successful guy. All his friends are dentists and people that work in tall office towers and this kind of important stuff. And he just knew that we had to go to war against Iraq. Of course we do. And this is a guy who went to college and stuff, right? Everyone he knows things. Of course we have to go to Iraq because of their ties to Al-Qaeda and their ties to the attack on the towers and all that. No, man, they had nothing to do with that. Of course they did. And as he put it to me then, why else would we be attacking them then? Right? Just like with Israel. What do you mean that they have the morality of Mao Zedong's communist butchers? If that was true, then how come we're their friends? Why are we helping them do that? It must be a lie. You can see it when, as Tucker Carlson predicted, they go to smear this Green Beret veteran who went and witnessed the war crimes against the Palestinians. And they go, no, the problem must be him. And there at least is, it's mostly liars claiming that, but there's a huge audience out there of people who are desperate to believe that this Green Beret with the Purple Heart and the Silver Star, who went to all the wars that they believed in and sent him to, that came and said, man, I saw this foreign country being cruel to their poor captives with my own eyes. No, he must be a liar. The problem is that he must be a commie. He must be some kind of leftist, or, oh, look, they have a fake one now, which is totally debunked, thoroughly debunked, forged arrest record pretending that he beat his wife, which is totally fake and not true, and thoroughly and provably debunked. A Village Crazy Lady is the handle of the lady on Twitter who debunked it. And she did the Robert Murphy show where she explained all about how it's obvious, just total forgery, totally fake. But they try to smear his character, and there's an audience of people out there who go, oh, good, this is their escape hatch. They don't have to believe that what this guy says is true because they heard something bad about him now, and so now it's all good. And they don't have to understand that, like, yeah, no, look, man, when you hear stories about how the communists treated people, like, what do you think, that those are myths or something? That's how communists are. When people tell you about the National Socialists in Germany and the terror state that they ran, that's not mythology, dude. That's not like a boogeyman story for kids. That's a true history of not too long ago. And then, so yeah, could you have a regime as inhuman as that in our current day, treating their own captive population in that way? Yeah. And in this case, is the U.S. backing them to the hilt, including arming them with every weapon they tote and their planes and their bombs and their intelligence and everything too? Yeah. That's what's going on here. America's backing the bad guys. Like if we were backing Ho Chi Minh against the people of the South, right? If we're backing Stalin against the whites, or I don't know enough about when the Civil War ended. What do I know? But anyway,
well, and to that point,
we're on the wrong side in this thing. And it's the cognitive dissonance. If it's wrong, then why are we doing it? But then, yeah, that's the point, dude. It's not a rhetorical question. It's a real question. And then the answer is because we have people in power who are corrupted for various reasons, who are doing the wrong thing at the expense of the rest of us. That's the answer.
Well, exactly, right? It's like buried in that is like this incredible, both presentism and also sort of bizarre naivete about America, right? Which is one, we're a good country who would never do bad things. And two, well, people don't do that anymore, right? That's something that, gross people from the past may have done. But I hate to say it, like, yeah, sure, the technology has enabled it to be particularly nasty, but like, in a historical sense, genocide is the norm. People do this all the time. And you can look at that, accepting that fact in one of two ways. You can either say, well, guess what? We don't care. We're just knowingly evil, in which case the discussion changes, right? Where this is a different thing. Or, you basically have to admit that, guess what? You're morally culpable in this, right? You are, at least to some small point, participating or running cover from it. And, I've been very heartened by the changing public sentiment around Israel and around our own foreign involvement, particularly among the under 30 crowd, right? I mean, I actually have, as a joke, right, a full color cardboard cutout of George Bush sitting next to me because it's a funny thing to have. But growing up in Red America during the global war on terror, right, literally it was Israel is the best country in the world. We need to go there, wherever there is.
Not America,
Muslims.
Israel.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that is like, that's what we should be like. We should be like them. And you compare that to now, where even my non-political friends are saying things that 10 or 15 years ago would have been, the most fringe of fringe opinions about our greatest ally. But Scott,
we're a socialist country, right? With
yes.
The government owns almost all the property. They got government health care, government schools. America's paying for free college up to graduate level for Israelis, while Americans are living outside. And you got, the average standard of living in Israel is higher than in the United States. And they're on our welfare. You might say because of our welfare. It's absolutely intolerable that anyone can stand that, man.
If you ever want to go down something that'll both make you mad and make you seem like an absolute tinfoil hat kook while being completely justified, looked into the rules about organ transplants as regards Israeli citizens in the U.S. I won't spoil it. It'll make you real mad. But Scott, we're fast coming up on time.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a hell of a way to lead out.
I know. Yeah, boy. Organ donor, no, dude. Do not trust. George Carlin was right, dude. It wasn't even funny. Looking for parts. Forget it, dude.
He was, in many cases, much more right than he realized. But Scott, where can people find you? I know I mentioned your show with Daryl, but where can people find more Scott Horton?
Okay, so I got 6,000 something interviews going back to 2003 at scotthorton.org. And I got a lot of those plus the audiobook if people want to sign up there at scotthortonshow.com. I got the first 3 sections of the audiobook of Provoked out, which is about 12 hours, even though that's just the first third of the book. It's a really long book. So I'm still working on that, but that's all at my Substack, scotthortonshow.com. And then I am the director of the Libertarian Institute, which is me and, 20, 25 really great libertarian writers and authors and podcasters at libertarianinstitute.org. And then, of course, I'm the editorial director of antiwar.com. where I don't really take credit for the work going on over there, but I like highlighting it. I've been a part of it for a very long time. And it's really the most important project on the internet. You really want to understand what's going on in the world, you read antiwar.com every day. And yeah, we're libertarians. It's not some commie thing. And in case you were worried about that, we're Ron Paul folk. And then my books, you can buy my books, Fool's Errand about Afghanistan, Enough Already about the war on terrorism, and Provoked about the Cold War with Russia and the war in Ukraine is my latest. And they're all on Amazon.com.
Well, again, I highly recommend all of those resources. As far as my stuff, Jay Burden Show available, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you want to listen to podcasts. If you want the episodes early and ad-free, you're going to have to throw me a few bucks. You can do so on Substack, Subscribestar, Patreon, or Gumroad. Again, Scott, it's a ton of fun having you on, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
And everyone at home, keep your head up. Lie can't last forever. Good night.